What Russia is doing today is no different from what the US and the Western world did to Africa when Africa had independence. Hello everyone, my name is Steven Upon and the channel you're watching is Africa and the World. I'm so excited you're here. Please subscribe, put on the notification bell, like, comment and share so that we can continue to build this channel together. Thank you so much for considering that. Now, I have a very simple assignment today to do. A friend after my previous video called me, and in the discussion he asked me a very basic question. Why is Russia fighting in Ukraine? I said this is a very basic question because this question has been the question everybody has been asking. And I know so many people who have been speaking with me about this war, especially Africans, do not understand the basic reason for this war. The reason is very simple. Ukraine decided that as a sovereign state, a nation of its own self-determination, it would want to join NATO and also join the European Union. This decision was made in 2002. Now, when this decision was made in 2002, Russia opposed it on the basis that Ukraine borders with Russia with over 2,000 kilometers long border. And therefore, if Ukraine should join NATO, it will undermine Russia's national security. And this is the reason why Russia opposed Ukraine's intent or intention to join NATO and also join the European Union. But did Russia, or does Russia have that power to say that me, Russia, I will not allow a country, a sovereign nation like Ukraine, to make choices for allies or to choose people Ukraine wants to associate with? Is that lawful? The answer is no. And I will explain to you why it is no. You see, when the USSR collapsed, Ukraine had a stockpile of over 1,700 to 1,900 active warheads, nuclear warheads. Ukraine was actually the third largest nuclear country in the world at the time. Ukraine had about 170 plus intercontinental ballistic missiles. Ukraine had about 40 nuclear bombers at the time. It is true that all these belong to the USSR, and Ukraine did not have control over all these. Yet, if Ukraine had decided to keep this, Ukraine would have had the opportunity to develop systems that could operate these missiles and also try to use it for its own self-protection or deterrent. But there was the call at the time in 1994 for what they refer to as non-nuclear proliferation. So it simply means that countries which did not have nuclear weapons are banned from creating nuclear weapons. Countries which have nuclear weapons are banned from creating more. And smaller countries which had nuclear weapons, there was a call on them for what is referred to as disarmament of nuclear weapons. So smaller countries which possessed nuclear weapons were called on to give up their nuclear weapons to other larger nations and also to destroy their nuclear systems in their countries. Ukraine, thinking about economic benefits at the time, not thinking about the future, decided that we will give our nuclear weapons to Russia. Kazakhstan did the same thing, and also Belarus did the same thing. They gave their nuclear weapons to Russia. Now, there was this agreement signed called the Budapest Memorandum. The Budapest Memorandum is a very significant agreement because that is what states the security guarantees and economic benefits that the nations, these three nations, which were ready to give up their nuclear weapons to Russia, would receive in return. Now, let me share with you this. So, the parties which signed this memorandum of understanding, which would allow Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus to give up their nuclear weapons, included United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, Ukraine itself, Belarus, and also Kazakhstan. So you can find these countries here. Now, what are some of the key components of this agreement? The people agreed on the following: respect the signatories' independence and sovereignty in the existing borders. So that is the first one, that every signatory of this agreement today, we are all bound to respect the existing borders of the signatories, which means that Russia was supposed to respect Ukraine's existing borders as of 1994, when this agreement was being signed on 5th December. The second thing is that they should refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of the signatories to the memorandum, and undertake that none of their weapons will ever be used against these countries, except in cases of self-defense or otherwise in accordance with the Charter of the United States. What this simply means is that every nation which is part of this treaty, the Budapest Memorandum, is to be considered a sovereign state, an independent country. Now, in that case, you can only attack such a country which is currently a non-nuclear country after giving up their nuclear weapon when they have attacked you. The third thing is that refrain from economic coercion designed to subordinate to their own interest the exercise by Ukraine, the Republic of Belarus, and Kazakhstan of the rights inherent in its sovereignty, and thus to secure advantages of any kind. So you cannot put any economic pressures on any of these countries. They are sovereign states, and each of them can make its own economic alliances of any kind so that they are able to develop as they wish. The last one I want to talk about is the fifth point. And the fifth point says that not to use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear weaponry state party to the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, except in the case of an attack on themselves, their territories or dependent territories, their armed forces or their allies. So what this number 5 means is that you cannot use nuclear weapon on non-nuclear states or on a state which has given off its nuclear weapon because of the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So Russia could never attack Ukraine with nuclear weapons. These are the points in the treaty. So then, why would Russia decide that Ukraine cannot join NATO? And if Ukraine decides to join NATO, then Russia will war against Ukraine. This now has led to many people, including the president of Ukraine, saying that they were wrong in giving off their nuclear weapons in the first place to Russia. Because if they had not given it off and they had developed a program to cater for the use of these nuclear weapons, then Russia could not have threatened them in the first place, let alone attacking them. So, what does this tell? This is a very common thing that happens in international politics. This has been happening so long in international politics, where the powerful nations try to subjugate and belittle the smaller ones. And we see this in the colonization of Africa. We also see this in the post-colonial imperialistic tactics of the West on Africa. I want to cite an example. What Russia is doing today is no different from what the US and the Western world did to Africa when Africa had independence. For instance, when Ghana had independence, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah decided that since we are coming from Western cruel, slave trade and colonization, let's choose our own allies at this point in time. So Nkrumah aligned with the East, that is Russia and also China and other nations in the East. Now, if you remember, the 24th February 1966 coup d'etat, which saw to the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, when he was in China trying to broker a deal that will lead to the end of the Vietnam War. Behind him, the CIA, according to their own declassified documents, showed that they orchestrated the coup that saw the end of the CPP and the Nkrumah government. Why? Because the independent nation Ghana at the time had decided to choose its own allies, that is Russia and China. It is wrong, as it was wrong for the US, the CIA, to do that, to lead the coup d'etat in 1960s. So is it wrong today for Russia to attack the independent Ukraine because Russia does not want Ukraine to exercise its sovereignty? Russia wants to be the one to control Ukraine on what Ukraine should do, who Ukraine should become allies with, because Russia knows that by Ukraine joining NATO and joining the European Union, Russia loses its sphere of influence among the Baltic states. Russia just wants to devoid Ukraine of its sovereignty, which is a crime, which is criminal, according to the memorandum that was signed in Budapest in regard to the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. I want you to join me in our next episode. Please share this video, watch it, like it, and also comment on it so that others can also see it. See you in my next video and have a good time. Bye.